Adriana La Cerva had one plan. Hold on, stay loyal, wait for things to become what she needed them to be. It sounds almost reasonable when you say it like that, but she was waiting for something that was never coming, and somewhere underneath all that patience was a woman who already knew it. What Adriana wanted wasn't complicated. She wanted a life. The full version, the house, the husband, the business of her own. The future that always felt like it was just around the corner. She wasn't asking for the world, she was asking for what Christopher kept promising her. And here's the thing, he did promise her those things. Repeatedly. He wasn't lying the way liars do. He believed it too, at least in the moments he said it. You can see it in how he says it. There's no calculation there. Just a man telling himself a story he needs to be true. The problem is that believing something and meaning it aren't the same as doing anything about it. Adriana couldn't hold that distinction, or she decided not to. The problem was never that Adriana didn't see reality. It's that seeing it and accepting it are two different things. Watch her in any room with Tony, with Carmela, with the other wives. She reads people. She knows when someone is performing and when they're being real. The show gives her these small moments of clarity that land quietly and precisely, observations that the other characters miss entirely. So why doesn't she use any of that on Christopher? The easy answer is love. But love doesn't explain the specific shape of what she does. She doesn't just love Christopher. She has built a version of him, patient, reformed, present, that she loves instead. And that version lives just slightly ahead of wherever they actually are. Always almost here. Always just needing a little more time. The real Christopher, volatile, addicted, resentful, she manages him, works around him, absorbs him. But she's not waiting for that Christopher to stay. She's waiting for the other one to arrive. There's a reason Adriana never leaves, and it's not weakness, it's not stupidity. It's something more recognizable than either of those things. Leaving Christopher doesn't just mean leaving Christopher, it means writing off everything she's already put in. The years, the loyalty, the club she poured herself into, the wedding she was planning, the version of herself that makes sense inside that relationship. Psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy, but that framing makes it sound like a mistaken thinking. For Adriana, it's more visceral than that. Leaving would require standing in the wreckage of everything she believed was coming and admitting that none of it was ever real, that the future she was protecting wasn't delayed, it was fictional. So instead, Adriana does what people do when the cost of leaving feels higher than the cost of staying. She adjusts her expectations downward, just enough to keep going. She finds new reasons to believe. She resets the clock, and the waiting continues. Not because she's given up, but because giving up would hurt more than anything Christopher has ever done to her. In her mind, waiting isn't surrender. It's a plan. She's not passive in her own mind. She thinks she's doing something, being patient, being loyal, holding space for the future they're supposed to have. Every time she swallows something she shouldn't have to swallow. Every time she doesn't confront something that deserves confronting, she's making a deposit into an account she believes will eventually pay out. It won't, but the belief is total, airtight. Christopher's addiction getting worse, that's a setback, not a signal. The FBI showing up, that's a threat to survive, not a reason to reconsider everything. Even sitting across from Agent Ciccarone being told plainly what her life actually is, part of her is still running the calculation, still working out how to get through this so the real life can resume. There is no real life. There never was. But Adriana can't find that fact anywhere that matters. And here's what makes Adriana's story so difficult to untangle. Waiting didn't only hurt her, sometimes it worked. Christopher gets promoted. He proposes. Adriana gets Crazy Horse, her own place, her name on something real. Every now and then, the future she's been waiting for seems a little closer than it did before. That's what makes her situation so much more complicated than it first appears. If every year with Christopher had been miserable, leaving would have been easier. But every time reality started catching up with her, something happened that made staying feel reasonable again. A promotion, a promise, a glimpse of the life she thought they were building. And each glimpse bought the dream a little more time. The problem is that some of what Adriana believed in was real. Christopher did love her, in his own way. Their lives were moving forward, at least on the surface. The real parts were just substantial enough to keep the rest of it believable. What changes, and this is the part that tends to get lost, isn't what Adriana knows. It's what she can no longer avoid knowing. By the time we reach the end of her arc, she has more information than she's ever had. She knows the FBI has her cornered. She understands what cooperation means and what refusing it means. She knows somewhere underneath everything that Christopher is not the person she's been waiting for. She has watched the evidence accumulate for years. The FBI assumes that eventually she'll do the math, that enough evidence, enough pressure, enough reality will force her to make a different choice. But Adriana isn't making a calculation. She's protecting a future she still believes in. And still, when she tells Christopher what's happening, she's not confessing because she's out of options. She's confessing because she still believes in him. She gives him the truth, the most dangerous thing she has, because she trusts that he'll finally be the version of himself she's been carrying around in her head. He calls Tony instead, and the hardest part is that nothing about it feels surprising. Christopher doesn't suddenly become a different person. He doesn't reveal some hidden cruelty that was there all along. If anything, he does exactly what he's always done. He chooses the life he already has over the life he keeps talking about. That's the distinction Adriana could never quite make. For years, she held on to a version of Christopher that was always just around the corner. Sober, reliable, present, the man who would finally choose her when it mattered most. But when that moment finally arrives, Christopher doesn't hesitate for long. And that's what makes the scene so devastating. Not because Adriana learned something new, but because she finally runs out of ways to explain away what she already knew. The evidence had been there for years. The addiction, the violence, the resentment, the promises that never quite turned into anything. Adriana saw all of it. She just kept finding reasons to believe it would eventually lead somewhere different. It didn't. Tony's phone call doesn't destroy the future she spent years waiting for. It proves that it was never coming. And in a strange way, that's where Adriana's story really ends. Not in the woods. Not when Silvio picks her up. Here, with a phone call. Everything after that is just the consequence arriving. And it arrives quickly. Silvio pulls up. She gets in the car. She already knows, maybe not consciously, but somewhere underneath the shock and the fear, something in her has finally stopped. The part of her that kept making excuses finally goes quiet. It's the only moment in her story where she's fully in the present, and it's the last one she gets. Adriana isn't a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people. That would be a much simpler story. She's a portrait of how hope, when it detaches from reality, stops being a lifeline and becomes a cage. She wasn't trapped by Christopher or Tony or the FBI. She was trapped by the version of the future she couldn't stop believing in. She thought time was bringing her closer to the life she wanted. In reality, it was only bringing the consequences closer.